I was 22 when this all came to light, and I still remember the exact moment like it was burned into my memory. Sunday lunches at my parents' house were usually chaotic but predictable. My mom fussing about the roast, my dad pretending to read the paper while sneaking bites from the kitchen, my brother Noah bragging about whatever new toy or trip he had lined up. I'd sit there exhausted, usually fresh from a double shift at the diner, eating quietly and trying to ignore the sinking feeling that I was always a little behind everyone else. That day, though, it felt like the air was different. My uncle, who lived out of state and only visited once or twice a year, was there. He was always the loud, joking type, so when he leaned back in his chair and said, "So, Oliver, how's that college fund treating you? You should be almost done spending it by now, right?" I thought he was joking. I actually laughed a little, confused. "What college fund?" I asked, still holding my fork midair. The smile slowly slid off his face. He blinked. "The fund," he said, looking between me and my parents. "I've been sending 50 grand a year to your folks since you were 17. They said it was for your tuition and living expenses. You didn't know?" The room went quiet in a way that made my stomach turn. My mom's hands froze over the dish towel. My dad cleared his throat but didn't look at me. And Noah, my brother, suddenly found the table's centerpiece extremely interesting. My uncle's voice had this awkward edge as he said, "Wait, you didn't get it? Where's all that money been going?" I swear, time slowed down. My heart was pounding in my ears. Because I hadn't gotten a dime from anyone. I'd been taking out loans, scraping together rent, eating canned soup and cereal most nights just to make it through. I'd been working 2 jobs, one at a diner and one doing inventory at a hardware store, just so I wouldn't have to drop out of school. And now this man was telling me there was a fund, $50,000 a year, for me? My parents still weren't saying anything. That's when the penny dropped. I put my fork down and asked, very slowly, "Where is the money?" My voice came out calm, but I could feel my hands shaking under the table. My dad muttered something about, "It's complicated, and we'll talk about this later." My mom tried to laugh it off and say, "Oh, you know how family finances get, everything's pooled." But my uncle cut her off. "I sent that money for Oliver. Not for you. Not for family finances. What are you talking about?" Noah had this tiny smirk on his face. And suddenly I remembered the string of new cars he'd had over the past few years, the once-in-a-lifetime, backpacking trips across Europe and Asia he'd bragged about on Instagram. The way my parents had thrown him a graduation party that cost more than my entire year's rent, while mine had been just a homemade cake at the kitchen table. My stomach sank lower and lower as it all clicked into place. I stood up so quickly my chair screeched against the floor. "So that's how you paid for all of it?" I asked, my voice rising. My mom's face went pale. "Oliver, sit down. Don't make a scene," she whispered. But I couldn't. My uncle looked furious now, demanding answers, but my parents still tried to wave it away, saying it was all for the good of the family. My dad finally said, "Your brother had opportunities we couldn't pass up. You're doing fine. You're working. You're learning responsibility." And that was the moment I nearly lost it. I wasn't fine. I was drowning. And they had taken money meant to help me stay afloat and handed it to Noah like he was the golden child of the century. Every late-night shift, every meal I skipped to save money, every panic attack over whether I could afford my books, it all hit me at once. My uncle looked at me, then at them, and said very sharply, "You owe him an explanation. And maybe a whole lot more than that." I didn't stay for dessert. I grabbed my jacket and walked out, my hands still trembling. My uncle followed me to the driveway and said quietly, "I'm sorry, kid. I thought you knew. I thought they were doing right by you." I couldn't even answer him. I just got in my car and drove back to my tiny apartment, where I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time staring at the wall. By the time the shock wore off, anger had taken its place. I kept thinking about how many times I'd begged my parents for just a little help, when I was short on rent, when my car broke down, when I couldn't afford my last semester's books, and they had said, "Sorry, money's tight." They let me humiliate myself borrowing from friends, maxing out my credit card, skipping meals, while they secretly funneled my uncle's money into Noah's European adventures. That night, I went through all my emails, my loan records, my bank statements. I started writing things down, trying to piece together a timeline. I even pulled up Noah's Instagram and scrolled through every post for the past 5 years, noting the dates and captions. There were trips to Bali, Paris, New York, Dubai. Each one lined up perfectly with the years I'd been barely scraping by. I didn't even feel jealous at that point. I felt cold, like something inside me had gone still. The next morning, my phone was blowing up, missed calls, texts from my parents asking me to come over so they could talk this through. But I didn't go. For the first time in my life, I didn't answer. And deep down, something told me this was only the beginning of what was about to unfold. The following week was one of the strangest of my life. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Texts from my mom that started off gentle. "We just want to explain, honey," and then turned defensive. "You don't understand everything that was going on." And eventually sharp. "You're overreacting. This is family business. Stop making it worse." My dad called a few times, always at night, leaving voicemails that sounded almost rehearsed. "Oliver, come by. We can work this out." Noah, unsurprisingly, never reached out, but I could see on his Instagram that he was having a blast on yet another boys' trip, this time skiing in Switzerland. The captions were smug: "Living life while you can, once-in-a-lifetime trip, #blessed, stuff like that. The more I thought about it, the more furious I became. I kept replaying my dad's words. "You're doing fine. You're learning responsibility." As if me drowning under student loans and working 16-hour days was some sort of character-building exercise. As if being neglected was a gift. I started to see the pattern everywhere. All the years they'd called me independent, self-sufficient, the one who never needed much, while Noah was the dreamer, the one we had to support. It wasn't about love. It was about priorities. And apparently, I had never been the priority. A few days later, I finally caved and went back to the house. Part of me wanted answers. Part of me wanted to hear them say it to my face. When I walked in, Mom was setting the table again, like it was just another Sunday, but Dad was already waiting in the living room. He gestured for me to sit, like I was a kid about to be scolded. "We didn't mean for you to find out this way," Dad started, his voice calm but patronizing. "The money was always meant to benefit the family as a whole. Your brother had opportunities we couldn't ignore, internships, study programs abroad. We had to act quickly, and frankly, we trusted that you would manage. You're resilient." I stared at him. "So you just decided for me that I didn't need it?" Mom jumped in, her tone soft but infuriating. "Oliver, you're strong. Noah wouldn't have thrived without those experiences. You've always been the practical one. We knew you could handle working in school. You knew I could handle taking out $30,000 in loans." I snapped. My voice cracked, and I hated that it did, but I couldn't hold it back. "Do you have any idea how many nights I've gone without sleep because I didn't know how I was going to pay rent? Do you know what it's like to sit in class hungry because you picked groceries or gas that week? And all that time, you had 50 grand a year just sitting there?" Mom winced. Dad stayed silent. Finally, Dad said, "We did what we thought was right. Noah needed the help more. He's not as driven as you." That was the moment something inside me snapped. Noah needed a third car more than I needed a place to live? He needed to go to Bali more than I needed textbooks? Are you listening to yourselves? Noah must have heard the shouting because he wandered into the room, sipping from a protein shake, looking bored. "You're still mad about that?" he said with a little laugh. "Man, you've always been dramatic. You should be thanking me. Those trips made me who I am." "Who you are?" I repeated, incredulous. "You mean a guy who's had everything handed to him while I broke my back to get scraps?" He shrugged. "Hey, not my fault you didn't ask for more help. You've always been too proud." It felt like a punch to the gut. Too proud. That's what they'd twisted it into. My years of silent struggle were now being painted as some sort of personal flaw, as if I'd chosen this. Mom reached out to pat my arm, but I stood up before she could touch me. "You know what?" I said, my voice low and shaking. "Keep the money. Keep pretending this is fair. But don't expect me to keep pretending everything's fine. Not anymore." I walked out before they could answer, my heart hammering. This time I didn't cry. I felt something else entirely, something colder, sharper. That night, I stayed up until 3 in the morning going through every document I had: financial aid forms, loan disbursements, even my old bank statements. I started building a file, almost without realizing it. Every time I found proof of what I'd been through: the dates of my loan applications, my pay stubs from the diner, the overdraft fees I'd gotten hit with, I added it to the pile. The more I saw it in black and white, the more determined I became. My uncle called me 2 days later. His voice was quiet but firm. I'm not sending another cent to your parents. If you want, I can send it directly to you next year. But you should know, they're mad. Your mom called me, said you're being ungrateful. I laughed bitterly. Ungrateful for what? For finding out they've been lying to me for 5 years. He sighed. Oliver, I don't want to make this worse, but you deserve that money. And you deserve answers. I thanked him and hung up, staring at the pile of papers on my desk. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about years of being treated like the afterthought. I could feel the shape of something forming. A plan, maybe, though I wasn't ready to admit that even to myself yet. When I went back to work the next day, my coworker Sarah asked if I was okay. I told her a little, just enough for her to shake her head and say, "That's not just unfair, Oliver. That's theft." Hearing her say it out loud made my chest tighten. Theft. I hadn't thought of it that way, but she was right. The next weekend, Mom texted me again. Sunday lunch is at 1. Please come, we can start fresh. Against my better judgment, I went. This time, though, I noticed things I hadn't before. The way they asked Noah about his upcoming trip to Tokyo like it was a family project. The way Mom beamed when he talked about his new car. The way Dad handed him an envelope of travel money, as if nothing had happened. When Mom turned to me and asked how work was going, I said, "Great. I just picked up a third shift. That should help me cover the interest on the loans I shouldn't have had to take out." The table went silent. Noah rolled his eyes. Dad muttered, "Don't start." "Oh, I'm just making conversation," I said, smiling in a way that wasn't really a smile. I could see Mom's jaw tighten. I think that was the moment she realized I wasn't going to let this go quietly. And she was right. I didn't go to their house for 3 weeks after that Sunday. I needed space, and I think part of me wanted them to stew in the silence. I was busy anyway. Midterms were coming up, shifts at the diner were getting longer, and the hardware store had just switched over to inventory season. It was exhausting, but it also kept me from thinking too much about what had happened. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Then one Friday night, right after I'd finished an 8-hour closing shift, my phone buzzed with a notification from my bank. My account balance was lower than it should have been, way lower. At first I thought it was a mistake. I logged in, my stomach in knots, and saw a withdrawal for nearly $1,200. My rent money. Gone. I sat down hard on the edge of my bed. That account had one co-signer from when I was 17, my dad. It had been set up when I was still a minor, so I could get a debit card, and we just never bothered to remove his name. I hadn't thought about it in years. And now, staring at the screen, I knew exactly what had happened. I called my mom first. She answered on the second ring, her voice chipper at first, and then she heard my tone. "Why is there money missing from my account?" I asked, my voice cold. There was a pause. "Oh," she said softly, like she'd been expecting this. "Your father transferred it. Your brother's Tokyo trip deposit was due, and you stole my rent money to pay for Noah's vacation?" I cut her off, my voice shaking. "Don't use words like that." She snapped suddenly, her tone turning sharp. "It's all the same pot of money, Oliver. We've always shared." "No," I said, standing up and pacing now, adrenaline spiking. "I've been paying every dime of that account with my own money for years. That's not your money. That's not Noah's money. That's mine." She sighed like I was being difficult. "Your father will replace it next month. You have to stop thinking about things so individually. We are a family. Sometimes sacrifices have to be made." "You mean my sacrifices?" I said bitterly. She didn't deny it. I hung up without another word and called my dad. He didn't pick up. 10 minutes later, I got a text from him. "We'll talk about this Sunday. Stop overreacting." That was the night I cried. Not just angry tears, but deep, guttural sobs that left me drained. I wasn't even crying about the money anymore. I was crying because I realized they would never see me the way they saw Noah. They would never treat me like I mattered as much. I could work myself into the ground, and they'd still see me as the responsible one who could handle anything, which meant I'd always be the one they took from. The next day, I went to the bank in person. I explained what happened, and the teller was sympathetic but firm. Because my dad's name was still on the account, the withdrawal was technically authorized. My stomach turned as I walked out. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, just staring out the windshield, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. That weekend, I didn't wait until Sunday lunch. I drove straight to my parents' house Saturday night. Mom opened the door, surprised, and I walked past her without saying a word. Dad was in the living room watching TV. I stood in front of it, and said, very calmly, "Give me my money back." He muted the TV and looked up at me with that disappointed dad expression that made me feel 12 years old again. "We already told you. We'll put it back next month." "I don't have next month," I said. "Rent is due Wednesday. You're going to transfer it back tonight." "Oliver," Mom said carefully from behind me, "you need to calm down." "No," I said, turning to face her. "You need to stop treating me like a bank account you can raid whenever you feel like it. This ends now. You take one more dollar from me, and I'm filing a police report." The room went dead silent. My dad's face darkened. "Don't threaten us. We're your parents." "Then act like it," I shot back. "Because right now, you're acting like thieves." That's when Noah came down the stairs, pulling on a jacket. "What's going on?" he asked lazily. "Nothing that concerns you," I said. "Is this about the money?" he asked, smirking. "Relax, man. Dad said he'd pay you back. You're acting like we emptied your life savings." "You did," I snapped. "You emptied my account, the one I use for rent and bills, to pay for your vacation." He shrugged. "Tokyo's not cheap. Besides, you can just work a few extra shifts. You're always working anyway." That did it. Something inside me went ice cold. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just looked at him and said, very quietly, "One day you're going to learn what it feels like to lose everything you think is guaranteed. And I'm going to be there when it happens." He actually laughed. "Sure, tough guy." And then he walked out the door. I turned back to my parents. "Transfer the money tonight. If I don't see it in my account by midnight, I'm filing a fraud report in the morning." Mom gasped. "You wouldn't." I just stared at her until she looked away. By the time I got home, the money had been transferred back. No message, no apology, just the balance back where it had been. I should have felt relieved, but instead I felt hollow. That night, lying awake, I realized something important. My parents weren't going to change. They didn't think they'd done anything wrong. They would keep taking from me, over and over again, as long as I let them. So I decided I wasn't going to let them anymore. I spent the next week quietly working on separating every part of my life from theirs. I went to the bank again and opened a brand new account with just my name on it. I redirected my paychecks. I updated every auto payment and deposit I had. I even requested copies of all the withdrawals and deposits from the past 5 years, building a paper trail. And then I started thinking about something I hadn't dared consider before, the money my uncle had sent. If he'd been sending $50,000 a year for 5 years, that was $250,000. If my parents had been spending it on Noah's cars and trips, there had to be proof, checks, transfers, something. One night, after my diner shift, I sat at my desk staring at the growing pile of paperwork. For the first time, I let myself imagine what it would look like if I did something about it. Not just confronting them. I'd done that. I was talking about really doing something. Something they couldn't ignore, something that would make them finally see me. And that's when the idea of revenge stopped being a passing fantasy and started becoming a plan. The days after I opened the new account were strangely quiet. My parents didn't call, didn't text, didn't even send one of those passive-aggressive, "hope you're well" messages Mom usually used to reel me back in. For a while, I thought maybe the silence meant they were finally reflecting, maybe even feeling guilty. Then came Sunday. I didn't plan on going to lunch. I'd already decided I was done playing along. But around noon, my uncle called. "I just got off the phone with your dad," he said, his tone clipped. "He told me you've been disrespectful, that you've threatened legal action. He says you're causing chaos in the family and you need to apologize." I felt something heavy settle in my chest. Apologize? For getting my own money back? He sighed. I told him I wasn't getting in the middle of it. "But Oliver," he's spinning this to everyone. "Your cousins, your grandparents. If you stay quiet, they're going to believe him." It felt like a gut punch. My parents weren't just taking from me anymore. They were rewriting the story to make me the villain. I hung up, numb, and sat on the floor of my apartment for a long time. By Monday, the calls started coming from other relatives. My aunt left a voicemail saying she was disappointed in me for starting drama over money. My grandmother, who rarely called, left a message that stung worse than anything. "Oliver, family is more important than money. Don't let pride ruin what we have." I almost threw my phone across the room. Pride. That was their narrative now, that I was some entitled brat throwing a tantrum about money I didn't need. Not a word about the years I'd spent scraping by. Not a word about the loans, the double shifts, the panic attacks. just that I was too proud. I was exhausted. Between work, school, and this nonstop tension, I barely slept. My grades started slipping. I missed a shift at the diner because I overslept for the first time ever, and my manager gave me a look like he didn't know what was happening to me. I barely recognized myself. Then came the final blow, the one that pushed me from angry to something colder, sharper. It was a Thursday night. I'd just finished a brutal 12-hour day. Classes in the morning, diner shift through the afternoon, and stocking inventory at the hardware store until 9 p.m. I came home, collapsed on the couch, and decided to check social media. That's when I saw it. Noah had posted a photo, first-class plane tickets, champagne in hand, grinning like he'd won the lottery. The caption read, "Off to Tokyo. Thanks Mom and Dad for making this happen." Something about that caption made my stomach twist. He wasn't even subtle. He was bragging about the trip they'd stolen from me to fund. The comments were full of friends saying things like, "Your parents are the best," and "You're so lucky." And I swear I felt my blood pressure spike. I sat there in the dark scrolling through his photos from the airport. Him in the lounge, him posing with a sushi platter, him joking about burning through Dad's credit card. It wasn't just the money anymore. It was the glee, the total lack of awareness. The knowledge that he knew exactly what had happened, knew how badly I'd been hurt, and didn't care. I turned off my phone and just sat there for a long time. My apartment was so quiet I could hear the hum of the fridge in the kitchen. I felt hollow, like all the fight had drained out of me. That night was my lowest point. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering what the point of all this was. If working this hard meant staying broke, if trying to be the good son meant being ignored, if standing up for myself just made me the family scapegoat. For a moment, I almost believed them. Almost believed I was the problem, that I was ungrateful, prideful, too dramatic. But then I remembered every late rent notice. Every time I'd swallowed my pride and asked for help only to be told money's tight. Every time they'd told me I was doing fine, while handing Noah the world on a silver platter. And slowly, something shifted. I got up, went to my desk, and pulled out the file I'd been building. Bank statements, loan documents, emails, screenshots of Noah's Instagram posts. I spread them out across the desk like puzzle pieces. And for the first time, I didn't feel powerless. Because looking at it all laid out, I realized I had something my parents didn't: proof. Dates, amounts, transactions that lined up perfectly with their trips and Noah's cars. This wasn't just a feeling anymore. This was a record. The next few weeks, I moved quietly. I kept my head down, went to work, went to class, and built my case. I requested my credit reports, highlighting the exact dates I'd been forced to take out loans. I downloaded every transfer from my old bank account showing the withdrawals my dad had made over the years. I even started saving screenshots of family group chat messages where they talked about Noah's trips like some kind of group project, all with timestamps. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not Sarah at work, not even my uncle. This wasn't just about confronting them anymore. This was about setting the stage for something bigger, something that would make them stop brushing me off like I was a child throwing a tantrum. It was strange. Once I started focusing on building the file, the heaviness lifted a little. I still felt hurt, still felt betrayed, but I also felt a clarity I hadn't had before. I stopped answering my parents' calls completely. I stopped going to Sunday lunch. Every time I saw one of Noah's posts, instead of getting angry, I just took a screenshot and filed it away. One night, as I was adding another document to the pile, I caught myself smiling for the first time in weeks. Because I knew, when this was ready, when I was ready, there would be no denying what they'd done. No gaslighting, no rewriting the story, no making me the villain. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt something close to hope. I wasn't at the finish line yet, but I was no longer drowning. I was standing up, one piece of evidence at a time, building something solid under my feet. And I had a feeling that when I finally decided to use all of this, it was going to shake my family in a way they didn't see coming. It's strange how quickly things start to feel different once you stop begging for scraps and start taking control. The first big shift came when I got a call from my uncle a few weeks later. "I'm sending the next year's money directly to you," he said flatly. "I don't trust your parents to handle it anymore." At first I didn't know what to say. $50,000, just like that, transferred to my name, no middleman. I sat on my bed staring at the bank notification, my heart hammering. This was more money than I'd ever seen in my life, and for once, It wasn't going straight into a black hole. It was mine. I didn't go on a spending spree. If anything, the money made me calmer. For the first time since college started, I could breathe. I paid off my rent for the next 3 months. I made a lump sum payment on my smallest loan and watched the balance drop to zero. I stocked my fridge with actual groceries, not just the cheapest bulk pasta I could find, and cooked myself a real dinner for the first time in months. The next morning I woke up early, made coffee, and realized I didn't feel like I was running on fumes anymore. My body wasn't in survival mode. For the first time, I had a little bit of energy left over to think about the future. That weekend, I went to a quiet coffee shop and spread out all my documents, bank statements, loan records, screenshots. I started organizing them chronologically, adding notes about which withdrawals lined up with which purchases or trips. The pattern was crystal clear now. Thousands taken from my account at the same time as Noah's birthday trip to Paris. More money gone right before his study abroad summer in Barcelona. I put everything in a binder, labeled and tabbed. Looking at it all lined up like that felt strangely empowering. This wasn't just a pile of complaints anymore. It was evidence. And the more I organized, the more confident I became. My grades started creeping back up too. Without the crushing anxiety about money, I could focus in class again. I stayed after lectures, asked questions, even started talking to one of my professors about grad school programs. The look of surprise on his face when I told him my GPA had been tanking for personal reasons lit a fire under me. "Oliver, you're one of the sharpest students in this class," he said. "Don't let anyone hold you back." That stuck with me. At work, my manager noticed the change too. "You seem lighter these days," she said one night after closing. "I was worried about you last month." "Yeah," I said, surprising myself by smiling. I was worried about me too. Still, I kept my distance from my parents. They didn't stop trying to pull me back in. Mom sent texts like, "Sunday lunch won't be the same without you," and "We miss you, honey. Can we talk?" But every time I thought about responding, I remembered the voicemail from my grandmother, the word pride, like a knife in my chest, and I let the phone go dark again. Then came the family barbecue. It was supposed to be a casual summer thing, just burgers, kids running around, everyone catching up, but I had a feeling it was going to be more than that. I almost didn't go, but something in me said I should. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the growing part of me that wasn't scared of confrontation anymore. When I showed up, conversations actually stopped for a second, like in one of those cliché movie scenes. My mom looked relieved, my dad looked annoyed, and Noah smirked like he'd already won whatever game we were playing. We made small talk for a while, me sitting on the porch steps with a soda, them chattering around the grill. And then, right as people started serving food, my dad cleared his throat and said, "I think we should talk about what's been going on." I stayed quiet. He launched into a speech, clearly rehearsed, about family unity and letting go of resentment and moving forward together. Mom nodded along, eyes shining like she expected me to burst into tears and hug them. I let him finish, then said calmly, "Are you ready to admit what you did?" The whole yard went silent. My dad's smile froze. "We've already explained." "No," I said, standing up. "You've justified it. There's a difference. Are you ready to admit you took money that wasn't yours and used it to fund Noah's vacations and cars while I was taking out loans to survive?" My uncle, who'd been standing by the grill, muttered, "Finally." My mom put a hand to her chest. "Oliver, not here." "Yes, here," I said. "Because you've been telling everyone I'm the problem. That I'm prideful, ungrateful. That I don't understand family sacrifices. Well, here's the truth. The only one sacrificing was me. And I have proof." I didn't pull out the binder. Not yet. But just saying the words made me feel 10 feet tall. For the first time, they didn't talk over me. They didn't laugh it off. They just stood there, staring. Noah finally broke the silence. "God, you're so dramatic," he said with a scoff. "You got the money back, didn't you? Move on." I turned to him. "You still don't get it. This was never just about the money. This was about 5 years of being treated like I didn't matter. Like my future was less important than your fun." For once, he didn't have a quick comeback. The rest of the barbecue was tense, but I didn't care. I sat there eating my burger, calm and collected, while they all whispered. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't the one on trial. They were. That night, back at my apartment, I sat with the binder on my lap and felt something click into place. I had leverage now, not just the money from my uncle, not just the proof, but the confidence. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need to beg them to see me. I could make them see me. And slowly, a new idea began to take shape. Something smarter than just confrontation. Something that would turn all those years of careful record-keeping into the kind of truth no one could deny. Not my parents, not Noah, not the relatives who'd called me prideful. I wasn't ready to pull the trigger yet, but I knew one thing. When I did, there would be no going back. The barbecue shifted something in me. Before that day, I had been reacting, hurt, angry, trying to defend myself. But after standing there in front of my entire family and speaking the truth out loud, I felt strangely steady. It wasn't just righteous anger anymore. It was focus. In the days that followed, I started thinking about what justice would really look like. Not a screaming match. Not another Sunday lunch where everyone pretended to apologize and then went back to business as usual. No, if I was going to do this, it needed to be undeniable. Something that would make them sit up, shut up, and actually reckon with what they'd done. And then the opportunity practically landed in my lap. It started when my uncle called again, this time, not to talk about money. "Hey, Oliver," he said casually. "Your dad asked me to be co-signer for a small business loan he's applying for. Do you know anything about that?" I nearly dropped the phone. "A loan?" "Yeah," he said. "Something about expanding the shop. He said it's just a formality, but the bank wanted a guarantor." I told him I'd think about it. I sat there in stunned silence. The shop was the little family-owned hardware store my dad had inherited from my grandfather, the same one where I'd been working part-time, stocking shelves and handling inventory. My dad never let me touch the books, but I knew the place was struggling. Business had been slow for years. And now, suddenly, they needed a loan big enough to require a co-signer. A slow, deliberate idea started forming in my mind. If they needed outside help, it meant they were desperate. And desperation meant leverage. "Uncle," I said carefully, "do you still have the copies of the transfers you made to Mom and Dad? The ones from my college fund?" There was a pause. "Yeah. What? Can you send them to me?" He hesitated. "Oliver, I'm not doing anything reckless, I promised. I just need them." He agreed. By the next morning, I had crisp, clean copies of every transfer he'd made for the past 5 years, with the memo line clearly stating for Oliver's tuition and living expenses. It was exactly the piece I'd been missing. Hard proof that the money had been intended for me and me alone. I added the documents to the binder and sat back, staring at the growing stack of evidence. The whole picture was there now. The money sent, the withdrawals taken, the trips that lined up with the dates. My case was airtight. The next step was gathering more information about the loan. I waited until my next shift at the hardware store, then casually asked the assistant manager about the expansion. "Oh yeah," he said with a grimace. "Your dad's been sweating bullets over that. If they don't get the funding, they might have to sell part of the property. He's been on the phone with the bank every other day." I nodded, hiding my reaction, but inside I felt a cold, steady sense of power. They needed money, and I had proof they had misused $250,000 that wasn't theirs. That weekend, instead of hiding from my parents, I called them. Mom sounded almost tearful when she picked up. "Oliver, I'm so glad you called. We've been worried about you." "I want to come over," I said simply. There was a pause. "Of course, honey. Sunday lunch." "No," I said. "Tonight." When I arrived, Dad was at the kitchen table with papers spread out in front of him. Loan applications, financial statements, I couldn't tell. He looked startled to see me. "Sit down," he said cautiously. I did. For a moment, no one spoke. Then I opened the binder, turned it toward them, and said, "I know everything." Mom glanced down at the pages and went pale. Dad's jaw tightened. "This is every transfer Uncle ever sent," I said, my voice calm and even. "This is every withdrawal from my account. This is every loan I had to take out to survive while you were using that money for Noah's cars and trips." "Oliver," Mom began, but I cut her off. "I'm not here to argue," I said. "I'm here to tell you how this is going to go. You are going to repay every dollar that was taken. You are going to tell the family the truth about what happened. And you are going to stop painting me as the ungrateful child who started drama for no reason." Dad leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "And if we don't?" I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Then I take this binder to Uncle, to Grandma, to anyone else who's been told I'm just being dramatic. I take it to the bank that's reviewing your loan application. I take it to anyone who needs to know exactly what kind of people you really are. Mom gasped. You wouldn't ruin the family's reputation like that. You already did, I said quietly. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time, I saw a real fear flicker across my dad's face. He knew I wasn't bluffing. Noah came into the kitchen midway through this and looked between us. What's going on? Oliver's blackmailing us, Dad snapped. I turned to him, calm as ever. It's not blackmail if it's the truth. Noah rolled his eyes. God, you're so dramatic. All this over some money. I ignored him. I was done arguing with people who refused to see reality. After a long silence, Dad said, well, think about it. You'll do more than think, I said, standing. You'll decide. Because if you don't, I will. And then I left, leaving the binder on the table. When I got back to my apartment, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I had done it. I had finally taken control of the narrative. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. They weren't just going to roll over and admit everything. They would fight back, deny, try to turn the tables again, which meant I needed to be ready. Over the next 2 weeks, I tightened every loose end in my life. I pulled my credit reports again to make sure nothing suspicious had been added. I started looking at legal aid clinics, just in case I needed to escalate things formally. I even had a quiet conversation with the assistant manager about the shop's finances, just enough to confirm that things were as bad as I suspected. Each step made me feel stronger, calmer, more focused. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was about protecting myself, about making sure they could never take from me again. And when the day came, because I knew it was coming, I would be ready to deliver the final blow in a way they couldn't ignore, couldn't twist, couldn't spin. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the quiet, responsible son holding everything together while they handed my future away. I was the one holding all the cards, and I intended to play them. The 2 weeks after I left that binder on their kitchen table were eerily quiet. No calls, no texts, no angry relatives ringing me up to scold me for making trouble. I knew better than to think this meant they'd simply agreed to my terms. No, my parents were planners. If they were silent, it meant they were regrouping, figuring out their next move. And so was I. I had been patient long enough. This wasn't about making them feel bad anymore. This was about making them face the truth, inescapably and publicly. I wanted there to be no room for gaslighting, no way to twist the story into Oliver being dramatic. The perfect opportunity came one Thursday evening when my uncle called. They invited me to a family dinner this Sunday, he said, sounding suspicious. Your mom said it was about restoring peace. What do you think? I felt the corner of my mouth lift. I think I should be there. I spent the next 2 days preparing like I was going to trial. I copied every page from the binder and organized it into separate folders. I printed out Noah's Instagram posts, highlighting the dates that lined up with the transfers and withdrawals. I even included my loan documents and pay stubs for context, a paper trail showing that while my family was funding Noah's luxury vacations, I was working double shifts and still falling behind. When Sunday came, I didn't go empty-handed. I walked into that house with the folder under my arm, calm and steady, as if I were just dropping by. My parents were already sitting at the table with Noah, who looked bored, and my uncle, who looked like he was bracing for a storm. Mom put on her best welcoming smile. Oliver, we're so glad you came. We just want to put this all behind us. I sat down across from them and placed the folder in the center of the table. We're not putting anything behind us until the truth is out. Dad's smile froze. Oliver, I opened the folder and started laying out the documents one by one. This is the first $50,000 transfer from Uncle. This is the bank record showing a $20,000 withdrawal from my account 2 days later. This is Noah's post from Paris, dated that same week. Noah groaned. Seriously? I ignored him and kept going, page after page, year after year. By the time I was done, the table was covered in evidence. You didn't just take money that wasn't yours, I said, my voice steady. You lied about it for years. You let me struggle, let me go into debt, while you funded Noah's lifestyle. And then, when I finally found out, you tried to make me the villain. Mom's face had gone pale. Dad leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, but I could see the tension in his jaw. Oliver, Mom began, we've already told you. No, I said sharply. You've told me excuses. You've told me why you think it was justified, but you've never once said the words, we were wrong. My uncle spoke up then, his voice firm. He's right. You told me that money was for him. I trusted you to handle it. and you betrayed that trust." Dad shot him a glare. "This isn't your business." "It became my business the second you lied to me," my uncle snapped. "I've been giving you money for 5 years thinking it was going to my nephew, not buying your son his third car." Noah slammed his hands on the table. "Oh my God, are we really doing this?" "So I got some trips." "Big deal. Oliver's fine. Look at him. He's all smug now with his little file." I turned to him slowly. "Do you know what I was doing while you were in Bali?" He rolled his eyes. "Working." "Yes," I said. "Working 16-hour days. Eating instant noodles because I couldn't afford groceries. Sitting in my car crying because I didn't know how I was going to pay rent. And you knew. You knew I was drowning. And you didn't care." For the first time, Noah didn't have a comeback. He looked away. Mom reached for my hand, but I pulled it back. "This is what's going to happen," I said, my voice calm but unyielding. "You're going to pay back every cent. You're going to send an email to the entire family explaining exactly what happened. And you're going to clear my name. Tell them I wasn't being prideful or dramatic. That I was right." Dad bristled. "Or what?" "Or I go to the bank reviewing your loan application," I said simply. "I give them copies of everything. The misused funds, the withdrawals. Let's see how eager they are to approve a loan for someone who's been diverting money meant for their child's education." The room went deathly quiet. "You wouldn't ruin us like that," Mom whispered. I met her eyes. "You already ruined me. This is just balance." Noah muttered, "This is insane." But no one was listening to him anymore. My uncle leaned forward. "I suggest you do what he's asking. He's got you cornered, and frankly, after seeing all this, I think he's being generous." I gathered the papers back into the folder, stood, and said, "You have 1 week." And then I walked out. I didn't run to my car. I didn't slam the door. I walked calmly, deliberately, every step feeling like I was taking back a piece of myself that I'd been forced to give up years ago. When I got home, I put the folder back on my desk and sat down, letting the quiet settle around me. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was anticipation, because now the clock was ticking. And for once, I wasn't the one waiting for their approval. They were the ones waiting on me. The week that followed felt strangely calm, at least on the surface. I went to work, went to class, ate my meals, and waited. Every morning, I woke up to see if there was an email or a message from my parents. There wasn't, but I knew they were talking, scrambling, weighing their options. On Friday night, just as I was finishing my shift at the diner, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my mom. "We want to talk. Come over Sunday. Please." I stared at it for a long moment, then typed back one word. "Okay." Sunday came, and as I drove to the house, my heart was steady. No racing pulse this time, no knot in my stomach. It felt like the final chapter of a book I'd been reading for too long, one I was finally ready to close. When I walked in, the entire family was there. Not just my parents and Noah, but my grandparents, my aunt, even two of my cousins. My uncle was sitting in the corner, arms crossed, watching. "Sit down," Dad said, his voice tight. I did. Mom cleared her throat and slid a piece of paper across the table. "We've drafted a letter to the family, explaining what happened." I read it carefully. It wasn't perfect, but it was close. They admitted the funds had been meant for me, admitted they had used them for Noah, admitted that I had been forced to take on debt because of it. They apologized, publicly, in writing, and said they were repaying what they could. I looked up, and the repayment. Dad's jaw tightened. "We can't pay it all at once. But we're selling Noah's car. That will cover at least part of it. The rest will pay monthly." I turned to Noah, who was sitting with his arms crossed, looking furious. "You're selling my car?" he exploded. "Yes," Dad said sharply. "You don't get to keep a gift bought with someone else's money." For the first time in years, Noah looked genuinely shocked. "You're just going to take it away? You took from your brother for 5 years, Dad snapped. "This is the least you can do." The room went quiet. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. But then I remembered all the times he'd smirked while I suffered, all the times he'd told me to work harder or stop being dramatic. Mom turned back to me. "Oliver, we know we can't undo what we did, but we're trying. Will this be enough?" I sat there for a long moment, letting the silence stretch. Everyone was watching me, waiting. Finally, I nodded. "It's a start." My uncle smiled faintly, like he'd been holding his breath this whole time. But I wasn't done yet. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder, the same one I'd left on their kitchen table. I set it down and said, "This stays with me. just in case anyone ever forgets how we got here. Dad's face darkened, but he didn't argue. Then I stood. You have my terms. You've made your decision. Now we see if you keep your word. I walked to the door, but before I left, I turned back. And one more thing, don't ever call me ungrateful again. I've been grateful my whole life. I've been patient, understanding, forgiving. That version of me is gone. From now on, I expect to be treated as an equal, not as a resource you can drain, not as the responsible one who will clean up everyone else's messes. As an equal. No one spoke. I left the house and stepped into the late afternoon sunlight. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was leaving defeated. I felt like I was leaving free. Over the next few months, the repayments started coming in. Small at first, but steady. I used every dollar to pay down my loans, watching the balances drop one by one until I was finally debt-free. When I made the last payment, I sat in my car in the parking lot and just breathed, smiling so hard my face hurt. Noah stopped posting flashy trip photos. The next time I saw him, he was driving an old used sedan. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Family gatherings were different after that. Tense, quieter. People treated me differently, not with pity, but with respect. My grandparents hugged me at Thanksgiving and said, "We're proud of you for standing up for yourself." My aunt apologized for believing the story my parents had told. And my parents, they were careful. They watched what they said around me, like they were finally aware that I wouldn't just swallow anything anymore. Months later, my dad tried to bring up the family sacrifice argument again, half joking. I just smiled and said, "Some sacrifices aren't mine to make." He didn't bring it up again. The last time I drove away from their house, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror and almost didn't recognize myself. Not because I'd changed on the outside, but because I was no longer the kid who sat quietly at the table while everyone else decided my future for me. I was the one steering now. And as I turned onto the open road, I couldn't help but laugh, not bitterly this time, but freely, because I had finally won. Not just the money, not just the apology. I had won myself back.